I'm Amy.
I'm Wendell.
And I'm Patrick.
And
this is
Yes,
But Why?
Podcast.
Just now when we were talking about students having the misconception that everyone's going to go to SNL, I was talking about how like there's one guy from Austin that went in the last year, so now like it's like fresh hope for everybody. But I feel like everybody gets famous in Chicago, so I mean certainly like it's a hotbed of like major improv, like people just doing it and getting famous and being like a big deal. So when you're teaching, when you're talking to students, like what's the vibe on that? Like, how much do you have to, like, I don't want to say dash dreams, but, like, you know, how do you deal with maintaining expectations with people?
Well, I make a joke every level A or beginner class that's out there that I teach, and I introduce myself, and at the end of the class, I'm like, hey guys, like, you know, you guys were fantastic, and oh, by the way, I'll see you guys on SNL next week. Just to kind of like acknowledge the elephant in the room, like how many of these young 20-year-old kids, I'm gonna call them kids even though they're adults, you know, are just there because they have the dream of stardom to get to SNL. And the way I kind of handle that is basically like I tell all of my students, you know, you're not ready for SNL or you're not ready for any kind of real stardom until you actually have a voice, like until you determine what is unique about what you do and what you have to say and what you have to share with the rest of the world. And that can come from multiple places. It's not necessarily improv. It can be, I'll take the usual things, like it could be stand-up, or it could be your writing, or it could be even just hosting. You know, there are multiple facets as to what an artist's voice is, and if you don't have one, there's a million other people out there that have the same generic voice out there that they're funny people. It's not good enough just to be funny. You have to have some kind of point to what it is that you're out there presenting, and that kind of level sets people, because pretty much I tell them that, you know, what I'm there to do is to give them the tools to discover their own choices and their own voices as well. And when they're like, oh, I actually have, you know, control over my own voice, that's awesome. And they get much more interested in the work. And those dreams are not necessarily dashed, but they're more just pushed back to the back burner of like, if you continue working on this immediate goal of you know, for yourself, then all these other good things will happen as a result of it.
Have you always been, have you always known your own voice? Like, have you had your eye on your own talent? Like, do you know how to manage that, or did you early on in your career, or is that something that you developed along the way?
I definitely developed that along the way. I mean, I've been doing improv for 13 years, and I didn't really know my voice until about year 9. That's when I finally figured out that I finally knew the way I like to improvise, what kinds of improv I enjoy doing. Like, I'm a major musical improv nerd, which is ironic because I'm not a major musical nerd. I love musical improv, but I'm not much of a musical guy, like a standard musical guy. But I love doing it. And so, you know, about year 9 is when I kind of went, hey, you know what? Like, I think I know what I like to do, and I think I know what I like to chase down, and what my approach actually is for getting good scenes, and, you know, scenes that I enjoy that audiences respond to. It was really a long path. Now, not everybody takes 9 years to get there. That's for sure. That was my path. You know, and I kind of developed my path, or my voice, right after determining that around 1,000 shows I kind of would know what my voice actually is, and it took about 9 years to get to 1,000 shows. And I was like,
did you actually write them down? Did you actually keep track?
No, I'm not like accurately, but
Sure.
It's more like a feel. more than anything else. But yeah, I mean, I was averaging anywhere from 100 shows a year, roughly. And so it's just like, oh, okay, you know, even if it was a 15-minute slot here or there, or doing multiple shows a night, which happened a lot. Like, it took a long time for me to finally figure out, like, oh yeah, like this is what I would like to do, which is great. You know, I'm not everybody needs 1,000 hours, or 1,000 shows, but I just think that, you know, looking for that, trying to be something that you're not, is the quickest way for you to get discouraged and to drop the work. And, you know, take your time. That's the biggest thing that I want everyone to do. You know, it doesn't matter if it's theater related or not. Like, if you take your time and you develop your voice and you're sure about it, then, you know, you're only limited by what you want to do at that point. You're no longer subjected to the genericism and mediocrity that's out there.
And to, like, define the idea of finding your voice for, like, non-theater people, I feel like it's like figuring out the way you like to live your life, or like knowing what it is in the world that you want to say. Like, what do you want to stand up for? Like, what political things are you specifically behind? What are the things that you like to do activity-wise? What are your friends like? Like establishing knowing yourself and knowing this is who I am, this is the way that I like working, and then figuring out and then communicating as yourself, knowing yourself really well. I like the idea that you mentioned that there's you know, you got to put in the work. So you put in the work just doing improv shows, and once you felt comfortable with the, like, mechanics of it, once you felt like you know, were doing it without struggling to do it, that's when you found your voice and what you wanted to say. And this is a huge question, but, like, what is that? Like, if you ask me this, I don't know what I'd say. So you can say, I don't know. It's fine.
I'm gonna take a stab at it and see if people think I'm full of malarkey. I'll use the family-friendly word here.
Oh, you can swear. It's totally fine.
I think that even better. We'll just keep malarkey because not very many people use it anymore.
It's a solid.
I think I think that part of what I do. I think where I come from, or where my voice is improvisationally, is really, it's two-pronged approach. The biggest one, irrespective of what I want to do, me artistically, is that I want my improvisation to be memorable. My improvisation to be memorable and entertaining. Entertaining meaning that a person who is not an improviser can watch my show and think it's hilarious, or think that it's deep, or think that that there was value, that the $5 to $15 to $20 that they spent for that show was worth the money or more. That's the first thing. That's more paramount than necessarily my artistic integrity. From an artistic perspective, I want to do improvisation where again, you walk out of the theater and you remembered what happened between the characters that I came up with, and how they interacted with other people. The relationships. That's the way we kind of describe it in improv. That my characters had some depth to them, and I hope that people recognize that you can be really, really funny and do a bunch of dick and fart jokes the whole time. Whereas I'd like to think that you, when you see me improvise, you think that you're actually watching an unscripted theater piece, and it could be completely farcical, and there could still be lots of dick and fart jokes in it. But at the end of the scene, I want you to think that, like, holy crap, there was actually depth to what they were doing. I could see the set that they were on. I could see the props that they were using. I could see the costuming they were using. Hopefully you see that at the end of the day. And that's kind of what I want to communicate with people, and that's how I approach my musical endeavors as well. It's like, if I'm going to play a song for you, I want it to be a song that you remember. That's about it. I don't know if that answers the question, but I'm going to go with it.
I mean, really, I think it's like whatever you're focused on. And I do think that it's hard because when you're a performer for a long time, I think that your voice changes sometimes. Like, I think that
absolutely.
sometimes, early on you really want to say this, but then when you get a little bit older, you're like, well, I said that, and now what else would I like to say? What else would I like to do? So, I think that's why it's good to accept the ebb and flow of projects, so that you can try your hand at different stuff. So, let's take it back. You are originally from San Antonio, is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah, I'm a San Antoniite.
Is that what they say?
I think so. I'm pretty sure that's how they're classified. I wanted to ask Beto O'Rourke and see what he thought about that term. I'm sure he would support it.
Sure. He seems quite supportive as a person. So I feel like he'd be like, sure, if that's what you're going to call it, sounds good to me.
That's all.
Yeah, he's a good dude. So you are, you started out did you start doing theater in San Antonio, or did you wait until after you left and went to college or moved away for other reasons?
Yeah, no, I was a massive band guy. I was a band geek back in the day, growing up in the mean streets of San Antonio, Texas. Living in Alamo Heights, the Alamo Heights School District, one of the richest school districts in Texas.
Great.
I was a major band guy, so I'm originally, I consider myself a musician more than an actor in a lot of ways. So I was a trumpet player, and then eventually I started rock bands and learned guitar and drums and all kinds of other instruments along the way. So my entire tenure in Texas was really music oriented. I had no, the closest I ever got to improvisation was jazz when I was in jazz bands in high school and college. But it was I never framed it as a personal item to pursue. It was more of just like, I'm part of a band, and that was good enough for me, and we were going to get a tour bus and rule the world and throw TVs out of hotels into swimming pools. Like, that was about as far as I wanted to go with it.
Yeah.
And then I left in 98. I left and moved to Chicago. Reason being was not because I was chasing the Smashing Pumpkins, who are my favorite band of all time.
He doth protest
but rather, but I moved up here because it was literally the furthest place away from Texas. I needed to spread my wings, and I was offered a job here, and so I moved in '98 with no friends or family, and spent 7 years in corporate America before the idea of doing anything with theater or doing anything with comedy even popped up.
Oh, did you go to college in Texas, and then straight out of college you got a job offer?
That's right.
Wow,
Yep.
Good for you. You're very smart, clearly.
I hope so.
Yeah. I bet you the company that hired you thought so. Yeah, I mean, they moved you far away.
I've been with them
right?
20 years.
Oh, you still work for them?
Yeah.
Wow,
Yeah, I
that's
still work for
awesome.
them.
That's a pretty great gig.
Yeah.
Huh.
So
you were working originally, and so what did you go to college for? And I guess really the question is, what's your day job, or what's this job, if you don't mind me talking about it?
I'm an IT nerd. So ironically, what I do is I do IT architecture, which means I make stuff up, but just with computers. So it's kind of improvisationally related. So yeah, I literally write architectures to solve customer problems using, information technology solutions, and I just make them up. See, it's really boring to talk about, so I learned early on that unless you're asked that question directly, like, I never really talk about it. Many people think that I do acting as a full-time job because they never see anything else on social media. And I'm like, no, acting is good, and then I finally have started getting paid for things. But, it's not at all. I'm not able to support a family at all on what acting can bring in.
Yeah, absolutely. Few of us really are, let's be honest. But I like that you
Yeah.
enjoy your job. You know what I mean? Like that you found a way to like make it fun for yourself, and clearly you have the skill. I mean, if you've been doing it for so long, that's amazing. And what an interesting way that your brain works. Like, is your improv? Are you using your improv brain like to do this kind of stuff? Because like you're solving on the fly. You don't get like, here's 3 weeks to solve a problem. You get like, hey,
Right.
there's a problem right now, solve it ASAP, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So
It's like high stress.
interestingly enough, the way I kind of see IT architecture and IT solutioning actually being the same side of a different side of the same coin, really. The same skills that I use to do my job are the same skills I have to use on stage.
Yeah.
I have to be able to think. I have to be able to think logically, and I also have to think about things that in a way that aren't concrete. They're abstract, and abstract thinking is required because you have these pieces of software doing things or hardware doing things that you cannot physically see or understand, like in a mechanical world. So you have to be able to abstract what they're doing in your brain, and then be able to use solutions to interface with what they're doing. And it's the same thing that you kind of do with theater in a lot of ways, because many times you don't have a set, or you don't have you don't know what situations you're getting yourself into, and so you have to effectively be so open and build the world in your brain all the time that the skills themselves just transfer over really well. I noticed it was really refreshing because in the Chicago scene, our scene is dominated by much younger, much more male, people, and many of those folks, not all, of course, but many of those folks don't work corporate. They're either sales, or they're I would just say non-traditional, non-corporate jobs. And that's not everybody, but I would say a majority, or at least 51%. When I went out I've done a lot of workshops out in the San Francisco Bay Area, in Silicon Valley. It was so refreshing to walk into theaters, and almost every single person there was some IT-related person. Yeah. And, like, every one of them were good improvisers. And I was like, holy smokes, like, that's dope. We can not only run a Mac, we can also make you laugh. That's going to be a trademark. That's a trademark saying right there.
Sure,
but like I don't run into a lot of IT people.
Yeah, man, that's interesting. Do you teach like corporate improv workshops in Chicago?
Absolutely. Yeah,
I was gonna say, that's a great way to connect.
Absolutely. Yeah, so I have a lot of my clients have been clients that I've been referred to either by former students or they were like, hey, we need you to come in at a much lower price point than the institutions in Chicago. Can you do this for us? Sure. So, I've done things for lawyer associations. I've done things for telecommunications companies, kids, mommy-centric kids workshops where, these companies that maybe they make accessories for new mothers or, existing mothers or for kids, like those kinds of companies. So the corporate side of things is really cool because I come from a corporate background. So it's a much easier sell when I go up to them and I'm like, I know what it's like to be in the corporate culture. And this is why it sucks. And here's how I can make it so much more fun. And here are the kinds of skills that your employees will learn as a result of the way I do it. And this is how they apply it. And so I'm able to make those connections pretty quickly, especially when I'm
so suited for that.
Yeah. Especially when you're like sometimes I get into a field that I'm not too familiar with, like the mommy stuff. I have kids of my own, So I kind of have secondhand knowledge of some of the modeling stuff, but there's other things that I don't. But even having that limited, the vernacular of knowing what latching means. If you know what latching means, then you can totally relate with your client and the people that are there, and then they'll give you kind of a leadway for you to be able to teach them something. Yeah. And so that's I've been benefiting a lot just of my personal experience and also my corporate experience.
Yeah, awesome. So when you got to Chicago, you said you spent a few years just working the job, just figuring stuff out, getting settled in a new city. And did you watch any improv shows? Did you go out to see comedy? How did you get there?
Sure. All right. So I'm gonna go with a multi-pronged approach for this one. So bear with me. Have you read or heard about the latest Mick Napier book? I think it's just called Long Form. It's a long form book that he wrote probably a couple of years ago. It came out. If you read the first, I want to say it's within the first 5 pages, you're going to read the same exact experience he had that I had with improv comedy. So, back it up to 1998. I'm single, ready to mingle, ready to rock it. Sure. And I decided I have absolutely no friends here in Chicago, so I need to go out to different places and meet people and hang out. So what I was doing, I was going to the Metro Chicago, which is a famous club here in Chicago, a rock club. They play all kinds of music. It's just a music venue. And I would go there twice a week, trying to meet not only other musicians so I could start another band, but also maybe meet some females. And so I'd meet these ladies, and I'd be like, great, well, I'm thinking of the traditional things. What do you do when you go on a date? Well, you go to a comedy club, right? At the time, I knew no difference. I thought I knew comedy. I thought comedy was, to me at that point, Eddie Murphy and Eddie Murphy. That's it. So I was looking up all these, comedy clubs, and I was familiar with Zanies, which are nationwide, and heard of the Improv and stuff like that, and then this place came out called Improv Olympic, and I'm like, oh, okay, this is literally just down the street from the Metro, so I'm going to take my dates there. So I started taking my dates to the Improv Olympic, which is now known as IO Chicago, and the first time I walk in, I sit down. I want to say at the time that they had a minimum, ordering. You had to order a certain number of drinks or items. I don't remember exactly but I remember ordering some really crappy food, and so that didn't bode well for the rest of the night. And I sat there and saw a herald, and these guys come out and they get a suggestion, and I yell out something like pumpernickel or something like that, and they start doing a sound collage, and they look like absolute idiots up on stage doing this, and they do it for 5 minutes, and I'm like, what the hell is this? And I look at my date, and she has this face like, what did you bring me to? And so for the next 40 minutes, we watch these kind of funny people do really weird interactions. I didn't know what to call them at the time. They were obviously scenes, and then they would go back and do these really weird group things. And by the end of the night, I walked out of there, and I just spent at the time, let's see, it was $15 a ticket, so $30 plus whatever I spent for food, so $60 to see something that was completely unfunny, and I had no idea what the hell I just watched. That was my very first introduction to Improv Olympic. And not only did I do that once, I did that 3 times. And every time walked out of there going, what the hell was that? I have no idea what I just watched. And so that gave me a really bad introduction to improv. I didn't know it was called improv at the time. I just knew that Improv Olympic was the place I wanted to avoid. And so that was at the very beginning. I never went back. And then fast forward 7 years later, I went to a company outing where I was meeting a brand new team that I was on, and we went out to dinner. And during the dinner, I was telling a story of some sort. I don't remember what it was. And I realized 45 minutes into this story, not only were people laughing the whole time, but I was coming up with these really cool jokes as I was going along. And then I realized, holy crap, I'm doing stand-up. I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm doing stand-up, and this is great. I love how this feels. So I did accidental stand at a dinner. And so I was really proud of myself. I Googled that night, I Googled comedy training Chicago, is what I typed into Google. And at the time, comedy training Chicago in Google would just give you one, they give you a listing of websites, but it give you just one sentence of what the description is for that website at the time. So it wasn't like the way it is now where you can hover your mouse over it and it'll show you part of the website. It was literally like Second City, home of comedy greats such as John Belushi and John Candy, and I'm like, and then they listed off all these people, and I'm like, oh, I know what these people are. Oh, cool. So they're all funny. They're all funny people. This is dope. So the very next day, I call the Second City and I tell them I want to sign up for your beginner comedy class, and they signed me up for an intro to improv class, level A class. And I show up to the very first day of class, and I remember being that alpha male 27-year-old at the time, and shaking hands with everybody and introducing myself, and I'm like, I'm going to be the funny guy. And our teacher walks in. She's like, hi, welcome to Second City, welcome to Level A. I can't wait to get started with you guys. By the end of this, we're going to teach you guys how to be great actors. And I raised my hand and I said, I'm here to be funny. That's what I'm here to learn. And she's in a very Zen Yoda-like way said, don't worry, the funny will come. And that's it. That's literally how I got into improv. It was completely by accident. I thought I was going to be the next Eddie Murphy. And now I'm just a broke-ass Jim Carrey / Wayne Brady. That's what I am now.
Oh, man. Jim Carrey / Wayne Brady. That's pretty great. That's a nice combo.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah.
Man. Well, how long did it take during that first class for you to truly dispel the notion of being funny guy?
Oh, and I didn't drop that literally until, year 5. It took me a long time to get over myself and drop my ego.
I'm so glad you lasted 5 years.
I wanted to be that guy, just, and I cringe when I think about it. I have 13 years worth of videotape of me improvising. I mean, I tape almost every show I do. I don't watch most of it. And I keep it, and it's all in the cloud. I have 2.5 terabytes of video that I've digitized over the years, and I'm cringe, and I'm hoping that if God forbid I die, my children or my wife decides to hire somebody to go through all that archive material and pull out the best bits. I'm like, just get the first 5 years, because that was horrible. I'm positive it was all horrible stuff. I would like it because of my ego, but like anybody else watching this is going to be like, oh my gosh, what was he thinking? So yeah, I still want to be that funny guy, but I've now learned a lot more about how it's no longer about my ego. And if it is about my ego, then I'm probably doing the wrong thing. I'm probably going to suck that night. So the more selfless I can play, the probably the better I'm going to be, and the better the product is going to be at the end of the day.
Yeah. Though, I mean, you need ego to keep yourself going. You got to be a little okay, I can do this. It's okay. People are always fighting against ego, but I'm like, don't get rid of it entirely. Those people are weird. Mm-hmm. You need a little. You need a manageable ego. You need the kind of ego you can be like, hey, ego, chill. And it'll go, it's fine, I got this. And you're like, all right, cool. Like, I always think about that, like, the different parts of yourself, you know, and I try to forgive. I teach a lot of beginner level improv classes too, and so I'm usually the person who is just sort of loving each and every one of those people, even the crazy ones, even the ones that are all like, let me tell you this, you know, I'm real funny at the office. Tell me about it. I'm really sorry about that. I'm like, yes. I was like, all right, tell us your favorite office joke, and I'm going to tell you why you'll never tell that again. Oh man!
You just bruised their inner children.
Yeah, well, you know, but I cradle them while I'm doing it, so it's okay. And also, I'm very like, well, I'm the kind of person who is like, don't worry, you'll get it. You know, like when I'm teaching, I'm like, you'll get it. So relax right now about like stressing yourself out about getting it. Like, it's going to work out. Just keep listening to what I'm saying. And some people will be like, well, why don't you just tell me the whole thing? And it's like, do you open up a book to the last page and read what happened at the end and then start at the beginning? No. You need your journey. I'm giving you your journey.
Yeah, that's a really good, yeah, that's a very good analogy. I'll start stealing it and giving you credit.
Please, no, you can steal it and say nothing. That's fine.
You know what, though? I love quoting other improv teachers because it at least it humbles my ego. It's like, I didn't come up with that. But I think, you know, I think that, you know, even I have some students, and they're not really students, they're more like colleagues that I coach, you know, and they're on their third or fourth year of training, and it's still very much that same exact thing that you're saying of like, you know, they want so badly that to understand everything that there is to know about what they're doing, and I tell them the same exact thing of like, every one of you is going to find your niche or your voice or your way of processing this information, and it's all going to happen at different times. It's never going to happen at the same time, and that's the beauty of what we do. So don't stress yourself out if you don't understand this. You know, I'm giving you tools, tricks, and tips to get you to that next level. You may not understand it while you're doing it, but it will become apparent once you've had some time to process it.
Yeah. Yeah. Teaching is fun. I enjoy doing it. I'm glad you enjoyed doing it as well. Tell me, how did you get there? How did you get from taking classes, performing, filming every show, and what happened? Like, what was the evolution of your going from a performer to becoming a leader of the community?
Cool. So I've always, this is going to sound egotistical, but I'm going to go with it because it's true. I've always kind of been the kind of person that is kind of like I'm the kind of person that falls into leadership positions. It doesn't mean that I don't want it, but it's a lot of the times, especially when it comes to things like production or the dirty work that nobody likes doing. I'm the kind of guy that's like, well, if nobody else is going to do it, I guess I'll do it. And because I can do it, people then go, oh, he's a leader. Like, I'll follow this guy because apparently he knows what he's doing. When I'm probably clueless, just like everybody else. But I'm really good, again, corporate background, I'm really good at being able to compartmentalize, there we go, that's the word, compartmentalize what it is that I do. And I always have an approach. I have a plan. Doesn't mean it's a great plan, just means I have one, which is more than a lot of other people. So from a leadership perspective, I always felt that I always had something to offer different to the improv community and the theater community as a whole, because I'm not just a performer. I've always been a performer / producer, right? I know what it's like to run a project. I know what it's like to produce a show because I've been doing rock shows for years. So I have this special skill set that many actors, especially in Chicago, don't develop until they're way done with their with their training. And I think that's starting to change, especially now. But at the time when I was doing it, it was like you just did every single intro class, and then you did a conservatory of some sort, and then you maybe went and did one of the other schools, and then you started doing your indie shows. I started doing indie shows the first year I was doing my training. I was already, by the end of my first year, I was already a part of a theater company. And so it took me, so I was always in a different category than most other people, because I was producing shows at year 2. And as from year 2 till about year 9, I was honing my craft as a performer. I was getting really good as a producer. And around year 9, it was just like, what's the next step? Because I've kind of not exhausted what I'm doing, but I'm getting bored. Like, I'm getting bored here. And I've always wanted to be a teacher. I've always wanted to teach at Second City. That was my goal. Like, when I started at Second City, I wanted to come back and become a teacher there. So at year 9, I finally started, I would hop on to small workshops with other people, and then I would start just having my own workshops. Luckily, in the area that I live in, they had a community theater, and the community theater is literally 7 minutes away from my house, but they had no improv program. And so I talked to them and asked them, would you allow me to start an improv program in your theater? And they were like, yeah. So I cut my teeth on putting together curriculums and approaches, which I just kind of went off of personal experience, and started teaching these classes at the community theater. And then I put a house team together, and then I put another house team together, and then started putting shows together. And as part of that, a lot of that still out of the main area of the 4 institutions of Chicago. I still wasn't doing Second City, IO, The Annoyance, or Comedy Sports, although I had relationships with all those theaters. Chicago is so competitive that I felt I needed to kind of find what my niche was. I didn't know at that time. So I spent another 2 years traveling everywhere, doing improv festivals, talking to different theater owners. I think you and I even had for a bit of me trying to get into the Austin area. And, I was just like, I'm hungry and I want to be able to build my resume and demonstrate that I can teach. So I've taught everywhere from both coasts. I've taught both coasts. I've gone to Minneapolis. I've gone to Texas. Florida, Baltimore, California, Oregon. I've gone to a bunch of different places just to cut my teeth on what it's like to be a traveling instructor and kind of showing myself like, yeah, you can do this. So by the time I got back to Chicago, I had a pretty extensive resume of all the things that I've been teaching. And a lot of those workshops were all independent. So, again, having that skill set of a producer really helps me out, because I not only had to learn what it was like to put these shows together or put these workshop packages together, but also had to learn how to conduct myself in those scenarios and learn how to be a teacher and learn how to be methodical about those things. So by the time I got back to Chicago, I already been teaching 2.5 years, and I'd already been, teaching abroad, basically, outside of this. I'm still trying to do an international gig. Someday that'll happen.
You never know. I mean, I've meeting a lot of people internationally recently. There have been a lot of people that I've been talking to in other cities. So it's out there. May I ask you, what is that like? You said, I wanted to go out there to do it, to know what it was like. I'm very interested in doing that kind of thing. I don't know at this point with babies at home, I can necessarily do it, but tell me what the experience is. How did you find the theaters to go to? How did you set it up? How did you get there? I know it's a lot of questions, but tell me what it's like.
No. I don't mind sharing this, because, these are the same exact questions that I had when I first started. Luckily, I found a mentor, Will Luera, who is currently in Sarasota, I believe. and was a former artistic director for Improv Boston.
And a guest on this podcast a couple weeks ago.
Excellent. Excellent. So Will and I, we hooked up in Chicago. And Will, like, I saw Will's resume, and I was like, holy crap, I want to do what you're doing. Right. You know, he was nothing but helpful. Like, he shared everything that he could with me about, you know, how to price your stuff, like how to set up your own thing. And I asked him a ton of questions. And the way I broke it down was basically I knew that I had to come in from the perspective of having to I had to bring more value than I was costing them. So I went with the idea of I'm going to look at the cities for which I have connections in. So let's say I'm going down to Austin. Right? I'd hit you up and be like, yo, can I crash on your couch for a couple of days? Yeah, go ahead. I'm assuming you'd say yes.
Sure.
Okay, good. So you know, so that would take care of my expenses for staying somewhere. So now I'm automatically cheaper than somebody else. Okay, cool. Hey, listen, do I have transportation when I get there? Great. So I might, you know, ask another friend, hey, brother, can I borrow your car or can you drive me around? Yeah, of course. Cool. So now they're just paying for my time and my airfare, most likely. And so I literally just thought of every city I can think of where I had family, friends, or acquaintances and started hitting people up and being like, you know, hey, if I was to come out your way, how long could I stay? Okay, cool. Once I got a confirmation for that, I'd see what theaters are around in that area. And I would literally cold call or cold email people and be like, hey, listen, I'm coming out this way. Here's my catalog of workshops. And I think at the time I maybe had 3. And I think I'm up to 12 now at this point. And I had 3 at the time, and it was done in a very beautiful Word template that I found on the internet. And I would tell them what the workshops were about and what they would learn and roughly what the cost structures would be and things of that nature. And, you know, it's a numbers game at that point. You know, you might find, you might have to call 100 people to maybe get 2, you know. So it was just due diligence of following up with people, hitting them up, circling back, offering them other things that maybe they were doing. If they were doing, let's say they're doing like a poetry slam tournament or something, maybe I'd come up with a workshop that was like poetry slam, concepts, spoken word, how to use improv in spoken word. I would just try to apply my skills and my approaches to things to come up with these workshops that made it more palatable to somebody wanting it. And that's how I got started. Also, improv festivals. You know, there are so many improv festivals nowadays. Back in the day, there was maybe 30 to 40, and now there's well over 100 that happened in a calendar year. So they're always looking for instructors. So that is a fantastic way of getting in on getting your foot in the door through the festival. But also, if you're a great teacher, they're going to want you back. And that's what happened to me in San Jose when I did the San Jose Improv Festival. I've been back 4 times since then. So that's my recommendation. Like, literally use your network of friends and family, get your place to stay, and then come up with your catalog and then pitch it and see what happens.
Wow. Cool. That's excellent advice. I really appreciate that. That is some wonderful... I've talked to a lot of people that have done a lot of different things, but like that particular path is such a... I hear so many people doing it, and I'm like, how do you accomplish this? Like, what are you doing? And I appreciate the idea that you mentioned, the sort of sales idea of you got to keep calling, and they might say no, and you just got to keep calling, the next one on the list, the next one on the list, and eventually somebody will say, yeah, all right, absolutely, I'll hire you. So it's good. It's fascinating. That's really excellent information. So you have traveled all over the place. You've been teaching. You've done this. Now, right now, when we talked up top, you were like, gosh, I have so many things that I'm working on. Try to give me an overview of right now in your life. Like, what are your projects? what are the things that are like super focusing, you're super focusing on? When you and I met, it was through Out of Bounds, speaking of theater festivals, and I believe you were in town to perform with Los Improviachis. So is that group still going? And is that one of your one of the wheels turning?
Yeah. So I'll talk about those things. So Los Improviachis is still going. 6 years later. In fact, we have a show in 2 weeks. So
nice.
We have been, we've slowed down a bit. I'm not going to lie. It's hard to keep that crazy spirit of things just because I've added so much to my plate. But it's definitely one of my front burner projects. And we're kind of in a rebuilding phase right now because, things happen. 6 years is a long time for any group, and we've had some personnel changes. So we're currently training some new people to bring on board, and we have our first show in 2 weeks. So I'm excited about that. So Los Improviachis is still running. I'm part of Salsation Theater Company, which is the longest-running Latino sketch comedy group in Chicago.
What's the name
I'm the
of it
artistic
again?
director for them. Salsation, Salsation.
Right on.
And we actually have we also have a good we have a sister relationship with the Latino Comedy Project out of Austin. So we have history there in Austin, Texas. So I'm running with that. I'm also I'm going to take care of all the Chicago stuff first. I'm also part of a two-man group called Entrepreneurial, which is a bilingual two-man improv team where we improvise in English and in Spanish with no translations, and it's just two of us, and it's a lot of fun, and it's great because between the two people in the group, we actually have one fluent person. My Spanish is okay; it's not great, but my English is impeccable, and my buddy Vlad Moreno, his Spanish is fantastic, and his English could use a little tune-up. So between the two of us, we can communicate. So that's going on strong, and we're going to be performing as part of a new festival called the Melanin Latinx Improv Festival here in Chicago. So that's coming up in October. Wow. Okay, let me see. Okay, and then there's some other projects which I can't really talk about because they're not solid yet, but there's more stuff in Chicago I'm doing with big institutionalized people. There we go. So, I'll definitely share those once those come out.
Yeah, those are fun.
The biggest things that I'm looking at right now, I started a theater company called Improviachis, LLC, out of Northwest Indiana. And Northwest Indiana is like, you can think of it as just a large suburb outside of Chicago. It's about 45 minutes southeast of Chicago. Yes, it's over in a different state, but it's really not that far away. That came as a result of needing to find a home for some house teams that I created with that community theater I spoke of earlier. So I've got a short-form improv team called Make Shift Up. There is an F in there, Make Shift Up. And a long-form musical improv team called the Tony Stanzas. Those are, I've been coaching those teams for the last 3.5 years now. I, through Improviachis, I'm basically, it's a theater company with no home. So we are currently looking for a home. I've been trying to do some fundraising to hopefully get us a space where we can dedicate, an actual theater for improv and sketch and stand-up. In the Northwest Indiana area, there's, in a 10-mile radius, there's something like 19 different community theaters, none of which do improv. And we're the only ones that do. And, not having space is difficult. It's not rare, but it's even more difficult when the infrastructure isn't there. It's not like Chicago where you can be a gypsy improv festival, moving from place to place, and you can survive. Here, it's literally like you're constantly looking for places to perform. We perform everywhere from the basement of a wine cellar to the top of a pizzeria to an abandoned building, like just dumb stuff like that. Like it's just, and I'm like, me paying my dues. I've paid my dues.
Those three locations, by the way, are like those 3 shows are like improv show or rave.
Right, exactly.
It's like a game.
Exactly.
What's happening here? Is it an improv show or a rave? Abandoned building. Ding, ding, ding. Improv show. Correct.
So like I'm too old for like paying my dues. Like I'm just like I've done that in Chicago. I've done the one light bulb in a basement gigs. I've done it in garages. I've done all that for years, and I'm like, you know what? Like I believe so much in what we're trying to build and what we're trying to do with doing it from zero that I need to find a space for this. So I've been fundraising. We have a Patreon, which I'll send you a link for, and hopefully you can
totally
attach that to the notes of the podcast.
Yeah.
But that's been eating up a majority of my time, and I'm now at the point where I'm booking different acts. I'm booking acts that aren't just mine. So we have some Midwestern acts from Chicago coming down now, and we're looking at expanding our programming, but it's hard to expand your programming and have consistency without a space.
Yeah. Why did you choose to focus on this particular group that you were working with versus, trying to get deeper into the Chicago scene? Chicago seems to be, well established. There's a lot of things going on. And I guess it's kind of like it's the question of like, why go it your own way when you could just get a job somewhere else? But like, what made you decide to focus on these groups that you had worked with at the community theater versus like digging in deeper at Second City or any of the other theaters to teach and become part of the faculty there?
Yeah, I think it's part of that is just because I'm a broken soul. I get to the point where I can follow. I can follow. I'm just not. I can't follow for too long. Like I said, I have this propensity of becoming a leader, and there's only so far you can go with somebody else's vision. And I think if I didn't have vision for what I wanted to do or what I wanted to accomplish, I think that I could totally be part of the machines that are in Chicago. But if you could talk to just anybody who knows me really well, at some point I'm going to go off and do my own thing, and I'm going to be not happy with the way things are running. Either you're going to have to turn it over to me, or I'm going to have some stake into it, or I'm just going to have to start my own thing. And so I found for my voice, I need a hand in the creative output and the business output of my endeavors, like the things that I care about that I dump time and effort into. And that's why I chose the hard route instead of kind of being like, I'm going to go and become, an I.O. Herald player. One, I'm too old for that. Two, I'm good. Like, that doesn't fit me anymore. Like, if you had asked me that 10 years ago, I probably would have a completely different feeling about it. But now it's like, I know that I've proven to myself that I can do the kinds of shows that I want to do, and I can produce them whether or not I have support or not, which is dope. Like, just being in that position of being able to do the kinds of shows I want to do. And I don't think I could go back to just being a company man anymore. Like, although it is infinitely more easy. It absolutely is infinitely more easy. And doing stuff in Northwest Indiana is, as far as, like, if you don't want to worry about things like, I don't know, promoting shows or, flyering or things of that nature, where they actually have a budget to do those things. Like, I think it's easier. Like, I don't have to worry about those details. But like literally, I had a show last night it wasn't sold out, but it sold really well. And I'm literally thinking about like, oh, okay, how many tickets did we sell? Did it go to the right account? Do we have concessions here? Like all the logistics of just doing that stuff. And as much as nerve-wracking as that was, it was really satisfying at the end of the night when you had a full house, you made some money, or broke even, I think. You saw the faces of the people walking out of there, and they were happy. And you're like, yeah, you did a good job. Now do it again, right?
Totally.
And Chicago is so saturated. Like it's such a saturated market that I don't think I can. I don't feel that I will have an impact in that culture. Like, not the kind of impact that I feel will make me happy. Not necessarily that it won't be impactful for anyone else. Just, I don't think I'll be happy trying to hold on to such a culture that's so big. I love going to smaller markets like Grand Rapids, Michigan, or Duluth, Idaho, or just those smaller places. San Antonio, even. Like, I love going to those smaller places because it part of it feeds my ego in the sense of like, hey, when I bring a workshop to one of these people, they're going to get so much more value out of this than somebody who is in Chicago and can spend the kind of money it takes to do an improv class at a second city. Like, that name recognition, I don't have to fight that in the smaller market, and I can still provide value, and I can see that what I'm doing is impacting that scene at a much more micro level than I can in Chicago. So I prefer being in smaller markets. With that said, I'm not shaking two sticks at being part of the second city now. I'm teaching there now, finally, after 13 years. Finally, I'm teaching at the place I always wanted to teach at. So, and there is a prestige to it that I will not get anywhere else. Absolutely not. And there's a value that I'm definitely benefiting from being part of a bigger machine. It's odd walking into classes still when I walk into a class. One, that the class is full. That's weird because I'm so used to doing classes I have to cancel all the time.
Yeah.
Or having people doing things for me, like, hey, we need a fan in this room, and I don't need to run around the building looking for a fan. Like, there are people that do it. So I'm still adjusting to the concept of teaching at a different institution where I'm not in charge. It's a dream come true for me. It's a bucket list item, definitely. And I'm learning again how to follow in a lot of ways. But it's cool now because like I'm bringing all this cool experience from the indie scene, and I'm re-injecting that back into the systems, and that turns me on. Because that's how I'm influencing the bigger Chicago machine. It might be very minor, but I'm getting them with the students of like, hey man, like here are some of the indie sensibilities I want you guys to hopefully hold on to as you go through the systems, and that's how hopefully we'll see better improv and better students who are doing their thing much more quickly and much more heartfully. There we go. That's the word.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I answered your question, but that's where I went with it.
Absolutely. I wrote down this beauty of a quote from you. There's only so far you can go with someone else's vision. I feel like I need to get that tattooed on myself. Like that's so real. Like you just put words to an idea that I've had in my head for forever. You know what I mean? Like I was like, yeah, totally. Like it's true how like if you're the kind of person, and I also fall into leadership positions, and by fall in, I mean, I'm the person who's like, this room is dirty, give me a broom. Like, when, that's, I jump in and take over. But at the same time, like, there is something great about running it on your own, having your own thing, making the decisions, and and, you know, even doing the work to find out what works and what doesn't, and, like, you know, building your team and helping them get something out of it as well. I always think that about other people. You know what I mean? Like when I'm creating, or when I'm trying to come up with something, it's always like, what does this person think? What does that person think? And it's like, no, what do I think? And that you just really, yeah, absolutely. No, you answered it super well, and then you told great stories to follow up and explain. So you're doing great. You're wonderful. I really appreciate
Thank you. I'm going to SNL next week now.
Yay! Yeah, this podcast is just directly input into the SNL casting people's ear. That's how it works. Yeah, sure.
You need a 42-year-old man? All right, Here we go.
Mm-hmm. Believe me. I'm waiting for the day when they're all like, hey, I'm liking what you're doing. Are you sitting at home with your child? Come over here to New York City and be in our show. Great. I will.
Yep, there you go.
Oh, man. It's not a silly dream. Like, if people are actually, like, going to put the effort into, like, doing all the, like, legwork, like, right away. Like, it's like, if you're 19, get working. You know?
Yeah, absolutely.
But at this point, I'm like, yeah, all right, well, they're not hiring 40-year-olds, so I'm going to develop something for myself. And also, I lived in New York, and no thank you. I'm good. I crossed it off the list. I've moved on to the next thing. But hey, who knows?
Yeah.
A lot of people haven't lived there. They would love to. Get in there. Do it.
Yeah, I think the thing that's interesting about that again, like it's one of those things of being able to listen to what your voice is like, and people have asked me recently in my classes. They've asked me like, hey, like, are you ever going to SNL? You're funny. I'm like, thank you, but no. And I was like, I'm not good enough for that. And they're like, what do you mean? Like, you're obviously funny. I'm like, yeah, but like, again, it's another skill set. Like, youth is a skill set as well. How can you channel your youth and your lack of responsibilities? Or, you know, you're not married, meaning you're not married, you don't have children, most likely at that age. How do you manage that to make a career for yourself? You know, and I'm like, I'm in a different place in my life now where I realized early on in my improv career that I was not going to be going to, the main stage of the Second City anytime soon. Nor was I going to go to SNL. And so my voice, basically was like, I just want to get the respect of my peers. That's all I really cared about. Like, I just want you to say, when you say Nelson Velazquez, you think, yeah, he's a good improviser. Or he's a good person, or he's a good producer. Like, he's good at what he does. And that's good enough. That really is good enough for me. That's an attainable goal for me. Doesn't mean that I don't dream about like being a writer on the Colbert Report or something like that, or what was the Colbert Report, but like, I'm also practical, and I also know, just because based on a prior conversation, like, I know that at some point I'm going to be like, you know what, I could probably do this myself.
Yeah.
I could come up with a show that's just like this. Like, why not just do it?
Yeah.
And that DIY ethic kicks in, and then I'm much more committed to making that a success. I tell people, the best revenge against the people who told you no is success. And if you're a little vindictive like I am, being successful is such a great, healthy way of dealing with negativity and dealing with naysayers. And plus, you get benefit personally. Like, hey, now you're pitching a screenplay. The people who told you didn't write a screenplay, write that screenplay. If you're 19 or if you're 45, like, write that screenplay and then shop it, and show them, be successful, and determine for yourself what that level of success is supposed to be. Not everybody's going to get on SNL. So if you don't get to SNL, what do you consider as your definition of success?
Yeah.
And I was fortunate enough to realize my shortcomings early on and going like, yeah, I'm not moving to LA or New York. Like, that's not happening. So I got to make it happen here in Chicago, which is daunting in itself, but it was, I think it was a really smart move because, again, for my expectations, like, now I don't have the monkey on the back of my neck going shoulda, coulda, woulda with regards to a Saturday Night Live or trying to get on the main stage of Second City or becoming an ensemble member of Comedy Sports. Like, now it's like, okay, like, I'm happy. I did a show for 45 people in the middle of nowhere, improv-wise, that is, middle of nowhere, Indiana, right? And people came out to see the show, and they laughed, and they paid good money, and they were entertained. Like, I did it. Dope.
Yeah.
Like, and hopefully that's, hopefully that gives some of your listeners just something to think about for themselves of, like, defining as part of their voice, what is the success? What does that mean? And that definition definitely can change as you get older.
Yeah. I was thinking as we were talking about SNL that, like, I'm past the point in my life when I would want to be an actor on SNL. I want to be Lorne Michaels. Like, I don't want to be one of the people that's writing for Lorne Michaels. I want to be Lorne Michaels. So, like, I was like, where's the page program for that? I was like, is there an internship where I can sign up to become Lorne Michaels? I don't know. I feel like at some point, but the show in and of itself is also kind of what you were saying about someone else's vision. It's this guy's vision. It's Lorne Michaels' vision.
Absolutely.
Like, it's his idea. He put it together. He's just lucky that his idea became the gold standard. Like, who knows what'll happen later in a few years. Lorne Michaels isn't a spring chicken anymore. Sorry, everyone. Sorry, Lorne. I'm sure you'll live very long. But, like, anything could happen. The whole system of it could change. And there's so many different things with comedy. And you mentioned earlier, like, the idea of different, like, it's different these days. And it is, like, with the internet and with the, like, everybody's got a phone in their pocket that can make them, they can make a video and put it up on YouTube immediately. Like, that in and of itself means that, you're not just competing with other people that are taking the classes and putting in the work and, like, trying. It's like every person. So, and I think because every person's putting stuff out there, what people want to take in becomes more specific and more specific and more specific. Like, now we are super niche creatures. I focus in on one specific thing and then I don't look at anything else. So it's like, hard to find new audience members when they've already curated all of their online views to make sure that they only see the things that they think they like. They have no new exciting things that they're checking out. I don't know. It's an interesting world. It's like a brave new world. We're going to have to figure it out in a different way. And, I have hopes in this next decade of my life that, all of a sudden it'll become super cool to be in your 40s. And then we'll have our own show. It'll be great. It'll be all of us. We'll be doing cool stuff. They'll be like, oh, look at them. They're in their 40s and they're so cool. And I'm like, I am cool.
I got that Generation X. I got that Generation X reference. That's hilarious.
I saw Reality Bites when I was in high school. Come on, guys. The mom on Stranger Things? She was a pop idol when I was growing up. Like,
that's right.
Oh, man. Yeah, I mean, it's great. I really appreciate talking to you. It's wonderful. I really enjoy my talks with people around the country because it really helps me to, like, sometimes put words to thoughts I've been having about, like, career stuff, and then, like, also just hearing about other people's paths really just helps me figure out other ways to do mine, or, like, I'll react to somebody like, I don't think that way, and it's like, oh, cool, I just found out that I didn't know what I thought, but I don't think that. So it's like, oh, cool, interesting. So it's fun to, like, talk and figure out that kind of stuff. I really appreciate all the information that you've given me. This is like an advice bonanza. The listeners are going to just learn so much from you, and I really appreciate that.
Well, thanks for having me on and letting me babble. Appreciate it.
That's my job here. I'm like, let me get them to babble. Listen, Nelson, thank you so much for being on the podcast. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your evening, and I wish you luck on all of the endeavors that you're working on.
Thanks. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for listening to Yes But Why podcast.